Yeah, I was by myself. I drug her from the bedroom. Tied her up, dumped her, whatever, drug her in the bedroom, made sure she's drowned in the bathtub, drug her through the house, out in the garage, and stuck her 55-gallon oil drum, stood it up with the lid on with the ring on it, tied her with a wrench.
It's definitely a sense of betrayal to realize the one person that you trusted the most in the world is the one person that would hurt you the most as well. I do feel like if my dad would answer the details surrounding that it may provide me with some closure and clarity on the situation.
I've been locked up almost 18 years, and I'm just getting started.
Microphone interview. Take one. Mark.
So what did you do?
I don't exactly remember.
I think you do.
I think I don't.
So there's a lot of victims, a lot of your victims out there?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me about that. That's interesting.
Tell you about what? I'm not trying to ride the lightning, kid.
I want to know the details. Michelle wants to know the details.
This picture has me as an infant and my mom and dad. My mom's name was Martha Perry. She preferred to go by Marty. If I were to summarize to a single word what this picture makes me feel, lies would be the best representation. Everything had changed in the course of 8 years, from this happy and smiling photo to absolute chaos. It's difficult for me to really describe because I have a condition called alexithymia, which is difficulty recognizing or feeling emotions. It's a part of the trauma response from PTSD and the murders. There are two different versions of him in my head. This one is Michael Fote, my dad. This was the dad that took me everywhere, and for me, the sun rose and set on his rear end. The other version is Michael Fote, the killer. I have never admitted that I see my dad in two full versions, because if I acknowledged how I feel about it every day, I would be a wreck every day, to be honest with you. I remember always caring very much about my mom. I do remember a time when I was young and we went and laid on a blanket in the yard. It was blue sky with just a little bit of clouds. We were just out there sunning, and I was happy as a clam just sitting there with my mom. It was a very small fragment of my life that I had her.
I'm sick of it!
I remember a lot of arguments, being asked to leave the room.
How big mouth is bad for you?
I'm not gonna be lectured by you.
A lot of fear. It was mostly just them yelling back and forth, and then my dad chasing my mother.
Keep it up! See what happens!
I could describe Their relationship, from what I remember, mostly is toxic. There was a day that my grandma asked me to get the mail. She'd asked me to wait until she was home to give it to her. I went and got the mail. My grandpa asked me to hand him the mail. I said, no. Mama asked me to hold on to the mail for her. He got loud, started yelling, and said, you know, you're gonna give me the goddamn mail.
You wanna be smart, huh? Cut it out. I'm warning you.
And he smacked me so hard on my leg that I had a welted, like completely raised, perfect shaped handprint on my thigh.
What's going on in here?
My dad, he was not okay with me getting hit by my grandpa for not handing him the mail, of all things. It just escalated. My grandpa, his back against the wall too, my dad putting his fist through the wall, maybe 4 inches to the side of my grandfather's head. I never saw my dad become this violent, and it scared me. My dad was in a criminal motorcycle gang. I was around people who may or may not commit crimes. I don't really want to talk about that part so much. I'm not comfortable. If I say one thing wrong, that may not go well.
Get in here.
Ow, you're hurting me.
So I remember this time my dad telling me I had to get down on the floor in the bathroom. Somebody was shooting at the house. He piled blankets, clothes, pillows on me, asked me to not leave the bathroom until he said it was safe and okay. It was pretty scary. I was trying to press myself down further to the floor, and I was already laying on the floor. You can't really get much closer than that. It felt like an eternity. I remember hearing my own heartbeat in my ears.
Have you ever seen your dad confessing to your mother's murder?
I have not ever seen my dad's confession to the police. I only know what I have heard by word of mouth.
Okay, go ahead and press the space bar.
What's her name? Martha Booth. Martha. Now, where's she from? Earlier, Kentucky. Martha's your ex, daughter Michelle. Well, she was my wife at the time. I know my wife whenever it was. Did you suffocate her or did you put her in the bathtub dry? I don't know. I was just trying to make sure. The bathtub just was just to make sure she wasn't gone. Yeah.
It's about as deliberate as it gets. Dumb bastard. Damn. I wasn't anticipating that. I wasn't anticipating motions. I was anticipating listening and understanding. Oh, God.
Do you regret watching that?
I don't have regrets. It helps. It's always emotional torture to go through the process. It just depends on the day. I am hoping that he has the ability to lead me closer to the truth.
Anyway, you know where she's at. It looks like a piece of genius work for a piece of reason. You'll never believe her somebody on that mother. I'm telling you. But that's not nothing to be proud of. That's just how my brain works.
I would like to know the truth. He would not talk to me about the subject matter of the murders.
Do you think he'll answer my questions?
I believe that because you guys aren't me, that my dad would answer a lot of questions.
Hello. This call is from a corrections facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. To accept this call, press 0. Hello?
How are you?
I'm okay. Did you get my email?
I got one about a week ago. It said that you talked to my daughter, and the board's executive assistant woke me up this morning. She wanted to know, she said, this reporter lady wants to come and see you. If she comes to see you, or are you going to speak with her? And I said, yes.
It looks as though if I come out there and I do this interview and if all this falls into place and we get a camera crew in there, I'm going to ask you questions about what you did.
The thing that people need to know is they just couldn't tell another lie.
This picture is my mom just smiling. I don't really remember seeing my mom smile a lot. I couldn't tell you what her voice sounded like. I couldn't tell you what her hair smelled like. But had my dad never killed my mom, I wouldn't have to wonder what her voice sounded like. I remember I ran outside to the swing set a little while after my dad and her got into a little bit of an argument. There was a lot of name calling. They were fighting and arguing and chasing each other. I sat on the swing set for what felt like an eternity. Then it was just silence. A while later, he came out and said that my mom left. But I did not see my mom leave. My dad had told me that he was going to take me to my grandma and grandpa for a few days. When we were leaving, my dad pulled a barrel out of the garage to give me room to go through. He worked on cars in the garage, so it wasn't really abnormal to have oil drums and stuff at the house. And we left. We didn't really have any notion or indication that we should report her as missing. My mom did have a history of leaving for anywhere from days to weeks at a time, but she always did come back. Nobody thought it was really out of the ordinary. My dad told us she was somewhere up north in Ohio. She was okay, she still wasn't coming back. There was always a feeling of abandonment. I had thought that she willingly left me behind and no longer cared. My dad started seeing Cynthia Pickens, and we just called her Cindy. For summer break, I would go out and spend a couple days to a week at a time with my dad and Cindy. The times I can remember the best were just her and I sitting on the porch talking. It was refreshing. It was just me and Cindy sitting talking and just enjoying our days. My dad had stated that they had gotten into an argument and that he kicked her out of the house and told her to leave. It felt pretty normal for my dad to be tired of who he was with and ready to move on. I think I was too young to be anything more than oblivious that there was a coincidence and my mother no longer being around and not seen, and Cindy no longer being around and not seen. March 15th of 2005, my dad was in jail for criminal menacing and was awaiting trial. One of the news stations was showing that a body had been found out at a garage. The video of the front of the shop looked really familiar to me, and I had thought that it may have been my dad's shop. When the police arrived to investigate, there was just this hole in the floor that was covered in gravel. In the gravel hole, they found human remains.
Hello. This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. To accept this call, press 0.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Long time, huh? So let me give you an update. I've reached out to the prison. They said that we can come do an interview.
Listen, I'm a son of a bitch. I'll scream at you. I ain't gonna phone up on you. I'll cuss you out. But I will never in life lie to you.
For that bitch like you got the best thing. So you jumped her? Well, yeah, I was wondering that happened. I might have stabbed her. I don't think she's still alive. But it's the best thing she's told right. Yeah, it would have. But I happened, I'm over it.
In the end, they were able to identify that as Cindy's remains. My dad had, I guess, buried Cindy in this small grave in the ground in the shop after he had killed her. About 2 days after they found Cindy's body, the police had came to my grandparents' house. The police began digging up the sidewalk at my grandparents' house. And they were excavating the area where the sidewalk was poured. And they did, in fact, find a 55-gallon oil drum. When my dad had admitted to killing Cindy, he had also revealed that he had killed my mother and that they could locate her body in a 55-gallon oil drum that was buried beneath a concrete sidewalk.
Mark was your ex, daughter Michelle. How did she get to the barrel? I was by myself. I got her a 55-gallon oil drum, stood it up with the lid on it, but bring on it, tight with a wrench. There you go.
And that is the barrel that my mom was buried in. It was a mixture of emotions, and I believe a sense of shock about the entirety of it all. I didn't know how to feel about it.
It is what it is. You know what I mean?
It's just not it's not as done as you would want it to be or anyone else would want it to be frank. The whole actuality of you killing my mom and Cindy, like, it's just not something that's going to be washed away.
Listen, I think I'm done talking about this, because all you're going to do is try to beat me to death. I'm cool.
I would like to know why he felt he had a need to kill my mom. Why he felt he had a need to kill Cindy. Why he hid their bodies. I have asked him. I spent years literally yelling at him with 15-minute phone calls. He got tired of being yelled at, so we just don't really talk about it a lot anymore. If you can get answers from my dad, I would really be impressed.
So I talked to Michelle over the last couple days.
Right.
And she had a lot of unanswered questions that she wanted me to ask you.
Right.
Are you willing and open to listen to what she wants to know?
Sure.
Okay. I'm speaking for Michelle, okay?
You better
I'm
be.
just doing what she's asked me to ask you.
You better be.
I better be.
You better be.
Michelle wants to know the details. She's seeking answers. Talk me through the day that you killed her mom.
I mean, I don't know that it started off any different than any other day. We got into a big argument, and it pursued into a big fight, and I choked her. I don't know how much more macabre you want to get than that.
It's not me wanting to know everything. It's your daughter.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I can't remember every single little thing. I mean, I killed her. I don't know what you want me to say.
I want you to say the truth and step by step what you did to her that day, from the living room to the bathroom to the drum.
I don't exactly remember.
I think you do.
I think I don't.
Why is it so hard to tell me?
I don't know, prosecutor.
Can you please just tell me in as much detail as you can, and tell this for the sake of Michelle's wanting to know this. Just say it.
All right, I killed her. I dug her to the bathtub. She was dead, for sure. I took her and put her in the drum, put the lid on the drum, put the band on the drum, and bolted it down tight.
I have a memory of when I do believe was the last time she was alive. It would have been the day that I was asked to stay out of the house on the swing set. I would like my dad to enlighten me if that was the day, because that would be critical for my own mental health to be able to move forward from that.
She went outside and she sat on the swing set. Is that the day that you killed her mother?
No,
How can you be sure?
because when I killed her mother, she was staying with friends and had been for several days.
I do think that I may have seen my mom at one point in a memory that blocked itself out until after she was found. My dad had pulled the barrel out of my way to give me room to walk through the garage. On my way past the barrel, I believe I did note my mom's body in there. I saw hair, what looked like hair and flesh, sitting just beneath the top of the barrel.
It never happened. Are you gonna let your kid walk up and see a body? No, neither am I. Come on, that's ridiculous. She might have seen the drum. She didn't see no body. The top was bolted on it with wrenches.
Okay. Well, why did she have this memory of seeing her mother
I
in...
don't know. I mean, she could have guilt, like where she could think, you know, that she should have known, but she didn't. You know what I mean? Or she should have known, but she didn't want to. You know what I mean? Are you gonna let your kid walk up and see a body? No, neither am I. Come on, that's ridiculous.
I know that my memory is not lying to me. I know that I saw my mom in the barrel. He went from trying to stay calm and collected to smiling and smirking. He knows he's full of crap. He is definitely lying as far as I'm concerned. My dad told me that he had wanted to build a sidewalk at my grandparents' house to help my older grandparents be able to get to the side door up the patio without having to walk down into the grass. My dad had asked me to stay indoors, and very specifically requested me to not look out the windows. But being very curious, I took a bit of a glimpse out anyway. I didn't know how a sidewalk was built, so when I'd seen my dad place the drum in the concrete, I had just assumed that it was a part of the process. The reality of that day is he hid my mom's body under the facade that it was to help my grandparents. In actuality, it was to help hide his crime.
The day you took Marty's body in the drum to your parents' house, Michelle remembers you telling her to wait inside and don't look out the window.
Probably.
She's convinced that she saw this 55-gallon drum.
She was in the house. I don't know what room she was in. If she would have went in my mom's room and looked out the window, she'd have been looking right at me.
But why did you choose your parents' house in the first place?
I don't know why I chose my parents' house, probably just because they wanted that step forward. And it was a big enough spot to put the barrel. And I didn't know what else I was gonna do with it. And I thought I was getting ready to go to jail on some drug charges. On some level, I'm sure I kept her there where I know where she was, like some kind of control thing or something. That was the best I could do. That was the best place I could find to put Marty's body at that time. It was just the right place at the right time type thing.
All right, so why did you kill her mother?
Marty was snitching. When you're in the bike gang, it is what it is. The bike gang I was in didn't pass out cookies and Barbie dolls to children. The bikers do today what organized crime did 50 years ago. Our mom was doing a bunch of stuff that was going to get my whole family killed. There was a guy that hung around our club, and he copied a big stack of papers for the Claremont County Sheriff's Department and showed me where she was snitching on everybody. All to get out of a felony 5, they wouldn't have did anything to her. She probably went to drug court or something. So, if you bring anybody around in clubs, it could be your wife, it could be your kid, it could be your brother, your sister, and they start that stuff, you have to take care of it. Period.
So what did you do?
What do you mean, what did I do? You know what I did. I killed her. And I don't particularly know that I planned on killing her, but I killed her.
It's even harder to realize that it was more deliberate than potentially a disagreement. I have always hoped that his admittance to having murdered her was to give me a sense of closure in the situation. I feel like an answer for why, but it's still not good enough to be why. I don't know when my dad became what he is today, but the man in that video would not be someone I want to claim as my father.
Jesus.
People think I don't have a conscience, but I do have a conscience. That's the whole reason I told him about Marty. Because I didn't want my daughter to grow up thinking that her mom just didn't want her. How could Michelle feel like anything but an orphan? It's horrible what I did. None of it is in any way her fault. She needs to know that. I'll apologize to her every day if I need to. Because I am sorry. And she is my daughter and I love her very much. The day she was born was the most happy day of my life. And I couldn't be more proud of her. The most cool thing for me right now would be to be able to babysit my grandson when my daughter was at work. Not the motorcycles, not the women, not the drugs, not being in the news and the newspaper, all none of that. If I could clean the slate and start over, that's where I would want to be. Hopefully, she'll take away some kind of closure from all this. I think you probably helped her to get to the bottom of it, kind of thing. And I appreciate that because I feel like maybe that'll help her to heal some. I wish if I could do it over, I would never do it again. I'm so sorry, Daddy loves you.
That was sincere. And I do believe he'd like to be around my son. I wish he wouldn't have screwed his life up so bad that he wouldn't have the opportunity.
I wish I never killed Michelle's mother. I wish none of it ever happened. But you can't take that back. There's that line again. Once you cross that line, you can't take that back. You know, it just don't work. There's no way of taking it back. How my life turned into the pile of it turned into. It didn't happen overnight. It just happens little by little by little by little. Well, there was a time when I just said, I'll never do something like that. The victim is my daughter. She don't have a mom or dad now. She's the victim. I really did love my kid. I still love my kid. But I was man enough to own up to what I did. You know what kind of balls it took to do that? Do you have any idea what kind of balls it took to do that? Do you have a clue? Do you have a clue? Come on, man.
Can we talk about Cynthia? Well, we're going to talk about Cynthia. So you stabbed her, and when she was dead, you got a tarp.
Wrapped her in a tarp. Took her up there to the shop and put her in a hole in the floor.
Did she deserve better than that?
Well, sure, everybody deserves better than that. Everybody deserves better than that. I accept responsibility for everything I've ever done. I didn't have to kill anybody. Those women ain't the only people I ever killed either. You know, certain factions of law enforcement are to be believed. I've killed 35 men and 2 women. I think they're a little optimistic on their numbers.
So there's a lot of victims, a lot of your victims out there?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me about that. That's interesting.
Tell you about what?
I mean, we're opening a whole nother can of worms here.
I'm not trying to ride the lightning, kid.
You don't want to come forward on all those people?
No. Nope.
How many?
I don't know, probably 20. Well, thank you. You're either my best friend or my worst enemy. I ain't decided which yet. I'll get back to you on that.
You can think about that one and let me know.
Well, y'all have a good.
Do you want to say anything else to Michelle, like while we're here? Last words? So there's a lot of your victims out there?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Tell you about what?
It's kind of up to say that you killed 20 people and sit there and laugh about it. It's disgusting, for one. Not only throw your life away, but throw that many other people's lives away. I think it would be a good thing if he were to admit who the supposed 20 different people are that he's killed besides my mom and Cindy, because the people related to those people deserve closure. When I was a kid, I wanted to be just like my dad. Definitely do not want to be just like my dad today. I'm living my life instead of allowing the trauma of the murders to continue to hold me back. I'm raising my son and tending to my job and maintaining a home. I grew up to be a better person than he clearly could commit to being. It's just safer for everybody if he is where he is. I believe that my dad is still very much capable of just as much violence as prior. Nobody else needs to die at his hand. I have started asking my dad to contact me less. I still want to maintain some contact, but minimal contact. I try to move forward in life with a sense that it's a new day, that is the past, and I cannot change the past. I don't try to show forgiveness for him for his benefit, but rather for my own and my own healing.
I never thought he would kill somebody.
But it's just sad.
You murdered a mother holding a child. It just doesn't look like my dad. I've never seen him look that evil.
I felt at that minute I had to kill her.
I ain't no angel, but I ain't evil.
I wanted that piece of out of my house.
We had a pact, and we were going to die together.
I just shot him. I didn't have a reason.
That right there is what pisses me off.
I will burn every possession her and her fat family own.
Are you friggin' kidding me? I'm so angry. I wish he would have died.
Nobody in Odessa slept with their windows open after the summer of 1998. Not after the photographs hit the local papers. Not after the grainy image of a young woman's abandoned Chevrolet Cavalier appeared on every television screen from Midland to El Paso. The headlights were still on when the rancher found it. Engine cold. Driver's door cracked open 6 inches. Purse still inside. Keys dangling from the ignition like someone had vanished in the middle of a sentence. And 26 years later, when investigators finally announced the case had been solved through a DNA breakthrough, hardened detectives stood in front of cameras looking physically shaken. Because the truth was worse than the rumors. Far worse. On the night of August 14th, 1998, 23-year-old Emily Parker left her shift at a diner just outside Odessa, Texas. It was nearly midnight. The heat still clung to the asphalt like steam rising from a skillet. Witnesses remembered her laughing before she walked out. One waitress said Emily had complained about a man staring at her from a corner booth for nearly an hour. Another remembered Emily rolling her eyes and calling him creepy. Nobody asked questions. In West Texas, strange men in roadside diners were as common as dust storms. Emily never made it home. At 2:13 a.m., a truck driver spotted her car abandoned along Farm Road 1788 near an oil field access gate. There were no skid marks, no shattered glass, no sign of a struggle. The scene looked wrong in a way deputies couldn't explain. Too clean, too quiet. The radio inside the car was still playing low country music to an empty seat. Deputies initially assumed she had walked away. By sunrise, they realized something terrible had happened. Search teams combed the dry fields for days. Helicopters swept over abandoned pump jacks and drainage culverts. Volunteers carried gallon jugs of water through miles of dead grass under brutal 104-degree heat. They found nothing. No footprints. No blood. No body. Only a single red scarf tangled on a barbed wire fence nearly half a mile from the road. Emily's mother identified it immediately. The story exploded across Texas media within 48 hours. Young waitress disappears. Car abandoned. Mysterious scarf. No witnesses. No suspects. Fear spread fast because the details felt random, meaningless, unpredictable. There was no ex-boyfriend under suspicion. No known stalker. No obvious motive. Emily Parker had simply exited reality somewhere between the diner and her apartment. And then came the first disturbing detail. Investigators discovered someone had wiped the steering wheel clean. Not partially. Completely. In 1998, forensic DNA technology was primitive compared to modern standards. Detectives could collect fingerprints, fibers, hairs. But touch DNA? Trace skin cell recovery? Familial genealogy databases? None of it existed yet in practical criminal investigation. Whoever abducted Emily either understood police procedure or got unbelievably lucky. But one detective refused to let the case die. His name was Daniel Reeves. At the time, Reeves was a 42-year-old investigator with the Ector County Sheriff's Office, known for chain-smoking through interviews and keeping yellow legal pads stacked in his office like towers. He had worked narcotics, robberies, domestic homicides. But this case crawled under his skin immediately, because the scene felt staged. Reeves noticed details others overlooked. Emily's purse remained untouched. $43 cash still inside. Her driver's license still in the wallet. If this had been robbery, it made no sense. If she'd run away voluntarily, it made even less sense. Reeves became convinced someone had approached her vehicle after she stopped along the roadside voluntarily. That meant one thing. She probably knew him. The investigation spiraled through dozens of interviews. Coworkers, friends, former classmates, customers at the diner, oil workers, truckers. A local mechanic who allegedly flirted with Emily aggressively weeks before the disappearance. Leads poured in faster than detectives could process them. Nearly all collapsed under scrutiny. Then came the anonymous phone call. A woman contacted police claiming she saw Emily arguing with a tall man beside her car shortly after midnight. The caller described him wearing work boots and a dark baseball cap. She refused to identify herself. Before dispatch could trace the call, the line disconnected. Police never found her again. That single vanished witness became one of the most haunting elements of the case. Detectives replayed the recording for years. Her voice sounded nervous, breathless, terrified. Some investigators believed she knew the killer personally. Others suspected it was a hoax. Then the investigation took an even darker turn. 6 weeks after Emily disappeared, another woman vanished less than 90 miles away. Her name was Carla Jennings, 27 years old, single mother. Last seen leaving a gas station outside Big Spring just after midnight. Her pickup truck was found abandoned near a dirt service road 3 days later. Again, no body. Again, almost no evidence. Texas newspapers immediately connected the cases. Panic spread across West Texas communities already isolated by endless highways and oil field darkness. Women stopped driving alone at night. Parents demanded curfews. Some local pastors openly warned congregations that a predator was hunting women along the Permian Basin corridors. Detective Reeves privately agreed. But officially, law enforcement denied any serial connection. The pressure intensified when reporters learned another disturbing detail buried in old records. A similar disappearance had occurred back in 1993. A college student named Natalie Briggs vanished while driving from Midland to Lubbock. Her remains were discovered 8 months later in a remote cattle ravine. Cause of death could not be determined. Evidence had degraded under extreme weather conditions. 3 women, 3 abandoned vehicles. 3 nighttime disappearances connected by long, empty Texas roads. And absolutely nothing tying a suspect to the crimes. By early 1999, the Emily Parker investigation was collapsing under its own exhaustion. Hundreds of interviews produced no arrests. The FBI briefly assisted, but eventually reduced involvement. Tips slowed. Witness memories faded. Detectives moved on to newer cases with fresher evidence and better odds. But Reeves never stopped. He carried Emily's case file home at night. He taped maps across his garage walls. He circled routes between Odessa, Midland, and Big Spring with red marker until the roads looked like veins spreading across skin. He became obsessed with timing, mileage, distances between gas stations. Cell towers were nearly useless back then. Surveillance cameras barely existed outside banks and major businesses. A predator moving through West Texas in 1998 could disappear into darkness effortlessly. And somebody had. Years passed. Emily Parker's face slowly disappeared from headlines. Her mother continued giving interviews every anniversary. Every August, local stations replayed the same footage of the abandoned car under police floodlights. Same cracked open door. Same unanswered questions. No arrests. No body. No closure. Then, in 2006, investigators received a letter postmarked from Albuquerque. Inside was a single sentence typed on plain white paper. She screamed longer than the others. No fingerprints. No saliva on the envelope. Nothing traceable. Detective Reeves reportedly stared at the letter for nearly 10 minutes without speaking. According to another deputy, he looked physically ill afterward. The wording terrified investigators because it implied multiple victims and direct knowledge of the crime. But even then, the case remained frozen. Technology still lagged behind the killer. For another decade, Emily Parker became what investigators call a shelved active. Technically open, realistically dead. New detectives inherited boxes of evidence they barely had time to review. DNA samples collected from the vehicle remained too degraded for meaningful comparison. Hair fibers recovered from the passenger seat lacked roots. Fingerprints inside the car belonged mostly to Emily and known acquaintances. The killer had slipped through the cracks of an era before modern forensics. And then science changed everything. In 2018, a wave of cold case breakthroughs stunned law enforcement across America. Investigators began using advanced genealogical DNA analysis to identify suspects once considered untouchable. Cases buried for 40 years suddenly cracked open. Murderers who believed time had erased them started appearing in interrogation rooms with gray hair and grandchildren. Detective Reeves was retired by then, but he was still watching. When he heard about the new technology, he reportedly contacted the sheriff's office within hours and asked one question. Do we still have the evidence? Against all odds, they did. Inside a climate-controlled storage unit sat sealed evidence boxes untouched for years. Among them was one item Reeves had insisted on preserving despite objections from earlier supervisors, the red scarf found on the barbed wire fence in 1998. Back then, tests found nothing useful. Now, scientists believed microscopic skin cells might still survive within the fibers. The scarf was shipped to a private forensic lab in late 2020. Investigators waited months. Then the phone rang. Analysts had recovered a partial male DNA profile. Not enough for direct identification, but enough for genealogy. And what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire investigation, because the DNA did not lead to a drifter, or a trucker, or an ex-boyfriend. It led to a respected Texas family with deep roots in law enforcement itself. And when detectives finally uncovered the name connected to that profile, several investigators reportedly thought the lab results had to be wrong. The name sitting on Detective Reeves' desk in the spring of 2021 did not belong to a career criminal. It did not belong to a transient, a fugitive, or some shadowy drifter hiding between state lines. It belonged to a man who had spent years moving comfortably through Texas communities without attracting so much as a parking ticket. Thomas Granger, 54 years old, former oil equipment technician, volunteer church member, married twice, no violent criminal record, and for more than 2 decades, nobody had ever connected him to the disappearance of Emily Parker. At first glance, the genealogy hit looked weak. The DNA recovered from the scarf did not directly identify Granger himself. Instead, it pointed toward distant relatives scattered across West Texas and eastern New Mexico. Investigators built family trees branch by branch, tracing marriages, cousins, siblings, old census records, military registrations. Thousands of names narrowed into hundreds. Hundreds narrowed into dozens. Then one detail stopped everyone cold. Thomas Granger had worked temporary maintenance contracts less than 15 miles from where Emily's car was discovered in August of 1998. And it got worse. Detectives uncovered payroll records placing him near Big Spring around the time Carla Jennings vanished 6 weeks later. 2 disappearances. Same region. Same time frame. Same man. Reeves reportedly stared at the timeline in silence for several minutes before muttering, Jesus Christ. But suspicion was not enough. Not after 23 years. Prosecutors needed certainty. They needed a direct DNA match. So investigators began watching Thomas Granger. By then, he was living quietly outside San Angelo in a faded tan house surrounded by mesquite trees and rusted farm equipment. Neighbors described him as polite but distant. He attended church irregularly, kept mostly to himself, drank coffee every morning at the same diner off Route 87. Nobody described him as threatening. That was the part detectives found most disturbing. Predators who survive for decades rarely look like monsters. In April 2021, surveillance teams followed Granger for nearly 2 weeks. They photographed him throwing away soda cans, cigarette butts, napkins. But Texas heat and contamination risks complicated everything. Investigators needed a clean sample that could stand in court. Finally, they got one. A plastic cup discarded outside a convenience store. The DNA inside matched the profile recovered from Emily Parker's scarf. After 23 years, detectives finally had a name connected directly to evidence from the night she vanished. But the breakthrough triggered another problem. Thomas Granger was dying. Medical records obtained during the investigation revealed he suffered from advanced liver disease. According to later reports, investigators feared he might die before they could uncover the full truth. Detectives moved fast. Quietly, they reopened old files connected to disappearances across West Texas stretching back into the early 1990s. What they found terrified them. Women missing near isolated highways. Abandoned vehicles. Late-night disappearances. Victims in their 20s. Cases scattered across counties that had never coordinated closely. One investigator later described the realization as watching separate horror movies suddenly merge into one. The pattern was impossible to ignore now. And yet Thomas Granger continued living his normal life completely unaware police were closing in around him. On June 11, 2021, investigators executed a covert search warrant on Granger's property while he attended a medical appointment. The search team expected little after 2 decades. Instead, they uncovered a graveyard of secrets. Inside an old metal shed behind the house, detectives found boxes containing women's jewelry, purses, driver's licenses, and newspaper clippings dating back to the 1990s. Some items belonged to missing women whose cases had never been solved. Others belonged to victims nobody recognized. The atmosphere inside the evidence room reportedly shifted immediately from excitement to dread. Detectives realized they might not be dealing with 2 or 3 murders. They might be looking at a serial predator hidden in plain sight for decades. One investigator later admitted he nearly vomited when technicians opened a small rusted toolbox recovered from the shed. Inside were dozens of photographs. Most appeared ordinary at first: highways, oil fields, empty parking lots. Then technicians discovered several disturbing Polaroids showing unconscious women inside a dimly lit room. Faces partially obscured. Wrists restrained. One image contained what appeared to be Emily Parker's distinctive red scarf. The room went silent. Forensic analysts enlarged the photographs digitally. Grain by grain. Pixel by pixel. They searched for identifiable features inside the background: electrical outlets, wallpaper patterns, floor stains, furniture edges. One analyst eventually isolated a faded calendar hanging behind one victim. The visible logo belonged to an Odessa trucking company that had gone bankrupt in 2002. Investigators immediately revisited Thomas Granger's employment history. In 1998, he had briefly worked maintenance at a warehouse property owned by that exact company. The warehouse had since been demolished. Detectives feared bodies might have vanished with it. But they still lacked one thing above all else: Emily Parker herself. Without a body, prosecutors faced enormous challenges proving homicide beyond reasonable doubt. Defense attorneys could argue disappearance, accidental death, voluntary flight. The DNA linked Granger to evidence, but not conclusively to murder. Investigators needed the final piece. Then another break arrived unexpectedly. A retired highway patrol officer contacted authorities after seeing renewed media coverage surrounding the reopened case. He remembered responding to a brush fire near Stanton, Texas in September 1998, weeks after Emily vanished. During cleanup operations, firefighters discovered what appeared to be human bone fragments scattered near an abandoned oil service road. At the time, officials assumed the remains were ancient or animal-related because the fire had heavily damaged the area. The fragments were boxed and forgotten in county storage. For 23 years, investigators tracked the evidence down in a deteriorating archive facility where boxes sat beneath layers of dust and dead insects. Most labels had faded beyond readability. One cardboard container marked simply "Possible Remains" held several charred fragments no larger than poker chips. Modern forensic testing confirmed the bones belonged to a young female. Mitochondrial DNA matched Emily Parker's mother. After more than 2 decades, Emily Parker had finally been found. The announcement shattered Odessa. Locals who remembered the original disappearance described hearing the news like reopening an old wound that never healed properly. Emily's mother reportedly collapsed when investigators confirmed the remains. She had spent 23 years refusing to move from the same house because she believed her daughter might still come home. Now she knew. And investigators knew something else too. The burn site had likely been an attempt to destroy evidence after Emily's death, which meant Thomas Granger had not merely abducted women. He had hunted them methodically. As forensic teams continued analyzing items recovered from Granger's property, another horrifying detail emerged. Soil traces found on several objects matched geological compositions near isolated oil access roads across multiple counties. Investigators began mapping the locations together. The pattern formed a corridor, a killing route, remote roads, industrial zones, empty stretches where headlights vanished into darkness and nobody asked questions until morning. Granger's work contracts had repeatedly placed him near those same areas over the years. Detectives now believed he used temporary oil field jobs as camouflage while targeting women traveling alone at night. And still, Thomas Granger had no idea the walls were closing in. On July 2, 2021, investigators finally brought him in for questioning. The interview lasted nearly 7 hours. Video transcripts later revealed a man calm almost to the point of unreality. Granger denied knowing Emily Parker initially, denied recognizing Carla Jennings, denied ever seeing the red scarf. Then detectives placed the Polaroids on the table. Witnesses later described the first visible crack in his composure as almost microscopic. A twitch near the mouth. Eyes lingering half a second too long on one photograph. Detective Reeves, brought out of retirement to observe the interview, reportedly leaned forward and asked quietly, "Which one screamed?" The room froze. Because Reeves had never publicly disclosed the wording from the anonymous 2006 letter. For the first time, Thomas Granger looked afraid. Interrogators pressed harder. They confronted him with the DNA match, the recovered remains, the photographs, employment records, witness statements, timelines. Granger's responses became erratic. At one point, he asked investigators whether they all got found. Not her. They. According to transcripts, the room fell completely silent after that sentence. Detectives believed they were inches away from a confession. Then Granger asked for an attorney. The interview ended immediately. But outside that interrogation room, panic was spreading through law enforcement agencies across Texas. Cold case investigators from multiple counties started comparing files. Missing persons detectives reopened abandoned disappearances dating back nearly 30 years. Families who had lost daughters, sisters, mothers suddenly flooded sheriff's offices demanding answers. Could Thomas Granger be responsible for all of them? Nobody knew. And then came the most chilling discovery of all. Because hidden behind a false wall inside Granger's shed, investigators uncovered a small locked cabinet containing cassette tapes. Old analog recordings labeled only with handwritten dates. August 1998. September 1998. October 1993. Dozens of them. Technicians rushed the tapes to forensic audio specialists. What investigators heard next would haunt even veteran detectives for the rest of their lives. The first cassette tape began with static. A low mechanical hiss. The sound of something brushing against fabric. Then a muffled thud somewhere in the background. Investigators initially thought the recording device had malfunctioned. But after several seconds, another sound emerged beneath the static. Breathing. Female. Uneven. Rapid. Terrified. Forensic audio specialists enhanced the tape frame by frame, while detectives crowded silently behind the glass of the lab observation room. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. One investigator later admitted the atmosphere felt less like evidence review and more like witnessing a crime in progress across time itself. Then a man's voice entered the recording.
Calm.
Controlled. Almost gentle. "You're okay," he whispered. The woman started crying harder. Several detectives reportedly recognized Thomas Granger's voice immediately from the July interrogation. The tape continued for nearly 17 minutes. Most of it consisted of muffled movement, crying, occasional scraping noises, and Granger speaking in short, quiet sentences investigators struggled to decipher. Then, near the end, the victim screamed. The sound was so sudden one analyst physically recoiled backward from the speakers. The tape cut off seconds later. No names were spoken. No direct confession existed. But everyone inside that lab understood exactly what they were hearing. By the time technicians finished reviewing the remaining cassettes, hardened homicide investigators were leaving the room pale and visibly shaken. Several tapes contained multiple female voices. Some victims pleaded to be released. Others sounded disoriented, possibly drugged. On one recording, a woman repeatedly begged for her child. Another tape contained nothing but crying for 11 uninterrupted minutes. Detective Reeves reportedly walked outside after listening to the third cassette and vomited beside the parking lot. The evidence transformed the investigation overnight. Thomas Granger was no longer merely a suspect in a single cold case. Investigators now believed they had uncovered one of the most prolific unidentified serial predators in Texas history. Agencies across the state coordinated through emergency task force meetings as analysts attempted to identify voices from the recordings. Families of missing women were contacted quietly. Many arrived carrying photographs decades old. The waiting rooms became scenes of unbearable tension. Mothers clutching purses with shaking hands. Brothers staring silently at floors. Detectives asking impossible questions. Would you recognize her voice after 20 years?
Some did.
One woman collapsed after hearing a brief segment from a 1994 cassette. She identified the voice as her younger sister Denise, who vanished while driving home from a nursing shift near Midland. Denise's case had gone unsolved for 27 years. Now her family finally knew she had not run away. She had been hunted. As investigators dug deeper into Granger's history, the timeline became increasingly horrifying. Employment records showed constant movement between oil field contracts across Texas and New Mexico throughout the 1990s. Temporary jobs, isolated worksites, long nighttime drives through rural corridors where women frequently traveled alone. Perfect hunting grounds. Former coworkers described him as quiet but helpful. One remembered Granger volunteering for overnight maintenance shifts nobody else wanted. Another recalled seeing restraints and tarps in the back of his truck, but assumed they were work-related equipment. A third witness delivered a detail investigators would never forget. He claimed Granger once joked during a lunch break that people disappear easy out here. At the time, everyone laughed. Now detectives sat replaying the statement in stunned silence. But the most disturbing revelation emerged from forensic analysis inside the shed itself. Luminol testing revealed massive traces of cleaned blood beneath the concrete floor. The structure had likely been used repeatedly over many years. Investigators tore sections apart searching for hidden compartments, buried evidence, fibers, hair, anything left behind. Then cadaver dogs reacted violently near the rear wall. Excavation crews broke through old concrete and uncovered a shallow cavity beneath the foundation. Inside were several personal items wrapped in deteriorating plastic sheeting, jewelry, fragments of women's clothing, 2 driver's licenses, and a tarnished silver necklace later identified as belonging to Carla Jennings. No bodies, but enough to connect Granger directly to another disappearance. The walls around him were collapsing fast. Yet Thomas Granger still refused to confess. During subsequent interviews, he alternated between eerie calm and complete emotional detachment. He denied harming anyone, claimed the recordings were consensual, claimed women visited the shed voluntarily. claimed investigators were twisting evidence to fit theories. Then prosecutors confronted him with Emily Parker's remains. For the first time, Granger stopped speaking entirely. Transcripts showed nearly 4 full minutes of silence inside the interrogation room. Detectives later described the atmosphere as suffocating. Granger stared downward the entire time, fingers folded tightly together. Then he quietly asked one question. How much did she burn? The statement detonated through the investigation like an explosion. Even without a direct confession, prosecutors now had evidence placing him in possession of victims, linked physically to Emily Parker through DNA, connected to Carla Jennings through recovered property, and psychologically tied to the burn site through knowledge never released publicly. The district attorney immediately prepared capital murder charges. News leaked before the official announcement. Within hours, television trucks lined streets outside the sheriff's office. National outlets descended on Odessa. Headlines spread across the country. Texas cold case breakthrough. DNA leads to serial killer suspect. Missing women mystery may be solved. Communities that had lived under uncertainty for decades suddenly found themselves confronting something even worse than mystery. A predator had walked among them for years unnoticed, and investigators feared the true victim count remained unknown. Search teams launched excavation operations across multiple counties tied to Granger's old employment routes. Ranchlands, desert clearings, abandoned oil pads, dry creek beds. Cadaver dogs swept miles of terrain beneath brutal summer heat while helicopters circled overhead. Then another body was found. Partial skeletal remains recovered near Crane County matched Denise Harper, the nurse who vanished in 1994. Evidence suggested she had suffered severe blunt force trauma before death. The discovery shattered any remaining doubt. Families who once prayed their missing loved ones might still be alive now braced for terrible confirmations one after another. And the confirmations kept coming. Investigators linked jewelry recovered from Granger's shed to at least 4 additional disappearances spanning from 1991 through 2003. Some cases had been considered unrelated for decades because jurisdictions never shared evidence effectively. Others were dismissed entirely due to lack of proof. Now, everything pointed toward one man. But perhaps the most chilling realization involved timing. There appeared to be long gaps between known disappearances. Years where no confirmed victims existed. Investigators initially believed Granger may have stopped killing temporarily. Then forensic psychologists studying the case proposed a darker theory. He likely never stopped. The victims simply had not been connected yet. That possibility transformed the investigation into a nightmare without edges. Analysts reopened files involving unidentified remains, transient women, runaways, and missing persons from across the Southwest. Detectives feared the actual number of victims could stretch far beyond Texas. And still, Thomas Granger remained emotionally unreadable. During one jailhouse interview, a psychiatrist asked whether he felt remorse. Granger reportedly smiled slightly before answering, "You people make monsters bigger than they are." The statement infuriated investigators because it contradicted the mountain of evidence accumulating around him. But it also revealed something deeply unsettling about his psychology. Granger did not appear driven by rage in the traditional sense. He displayed no explosive outbursts, no dramatic hatred toward women, no obvious sadistic boasting. Instead, experts described him as chillingly methodical, detached, clinical, a man capable of compartmentalizing horror with terrifying efficiency. Meanwhile, technicians continued restoring damaged cassette tapes. One recovered recording contained a breakthrough investigators had desperately hoped for. In the background of a victim's muffled cries, a television could be heard broadcasting a football game. Audio analysts isolated the announcer's voice and matched the broadcast to a specific Dallas Cowboys preseason game aired on August 21, 1998, exactly 1 week after Emily Parker vanished. That meant at least one victim was still alive days after abduction. The realization horrified everyone involved. Detective Reeves became obsessed with the timeline again, just as he had back in 1998. He revisited maps, reconstructed driving routes, estimated travel times between abduction sites and Granger's known work sites. Investigators now believed victims were sometimes held captive for extended periods before being killed. That possibility reignited fears about properties tied to Granger's past. Search warrants expanded rapidly. In September 2021, investigators examined a remote trailer property Granger rented briefly outside Monahans during the late 1990s. The structure had long since decayed into near collapse. Wind pushed dust through broken windows as forensic teams entered wearing respirators. Inside one bedroom, technicians discovered deep scratch marks carved into the interior wall beside a rusted bed frame. Someone had tried desperately to claw through the wood. And hidden beneath loose floorboards, investigators found another cassette tape. Unlike the others, this one carried a handwritten label. Emily. When forensic analysts finally played the recording, the room fell silent almost immediately. Because for the first time, investigators heard a victim say Thomas Granger's name out loud. The tape began with a metallic click. Then silence. Not empty silence, the heavy kind.
Dense.
Airless. The sound of a room where fear has already settled in long before the recording starts. Investigators listening through headphones could hear faint vibrations somewhere nearby, like machinery humming through walls. Oil equipment. Generators. Industrial noise. Then came Emily Parker's voice.
Weak. Exhausted.
Barely above a whisper. Please. The word cracked apart halfway through. Detectives who had worked the case for decades later admitted hearing her voice for the first time felt unreal. Emily had existed for years only through photographs, witness statements, and old missing person flyers curling on bulletin boards. Suddenly, she was alive again inside that tape, breathing somewhere in darkness in August 1998. Crying quietly. Terrified. For nearly 2 minutes, she said almost nothing coherent. Audio experts enhanced every second carefully. Investigators leaned closer each time fabric rustled or movement echoed in the background. Then a door opened. Footsteps entered the room. Emily inhaled sharply. And then she said it. Thomas, please let me go. Several investigators reportedly froze in place. There it was. Direct identification. Not circumstantial. Not theoretical. His name. Spoken by a terrified victim 23 years before police ever connected him to the crime. The rest of the tape only deepened the horror. Granger's voice remained eerily calm throughout the interaction. No yelling. No panic. Just controlled, measured responses investigators later described as more disturbing than rage itself. You're making this harder. You should have stayed in the car. Stop crying. At one point, Emily asked whether he was going to kill her. There was a long silence. Then Granger answered quietly, I don't know yet. The recording ended abruptly after sounds of movement and muffled struggling. Analysts detected no further audio beyond static. The tape became the emotional center of the entire investigation. Veteran detectives who spent careers around violence reportedly struggled to listen through it more than once. Emily's family was informed of the recording's existence, but initially declined to hear it themselves. Her mother simply asked investigators one question. Did she know she was dying? Nobody answered immediately, because nobody wanted to say yes. The prosecution's case against Thomas Granger now appeared overwhelming. DNA evidence, victim property, audio recordings, human remains, connections across multiple disappearances. Prosecutors prepared for what many believed would become one of the most significant serial murder trials in Texas history. Then everything nearly collapsed. In October 2021, Granger's attorneys filed a sweeping motion challenging the admissibility of genealogical DNA evidence. Defense experts argued the investigative process violated privacy protections and created unconstitutional pathways for identification. Legal analysts nationwide suddenly focused on the case because the outcome could influence future cold case prosecutions across America. Families panicked. After decades waiting for answers, they feared technical legal battles might allow Granger to escape accountability entirely. The hearings became brutal. Then prosecutors played the Emily tape in court. According to reporters inside the courtroom, The atmosphere changed instantly. Emily's trembling voice filled the chamber. "Thomas, please." One juror reportedly began crying before the tape finished. Even members of the defense team looked visibly shaken afterward. The judge ultimately ruled the DNA evidence admissible. The trial moved forward. Outside the courthouse, media frenzy exploded into something resembling national obsession. News anchors dissected every detail nightly. Podcasts revisited old disappearances potentially tied to Granger. Amateur investigators flooded online forums searching maps and timelines for additional unsolved cases. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued uncovering more disturbing evidence. A forensic examination of Granger's old vehicles revealed microscopic blood traces inside a pickup truck he owned in the late 1990s. DNA degradation prevented full identification, but mitochondrial markers suggested multiple female contributors. Then investigators discovered something even darker hidden among Granger's possessions. A notebook. Small, black, water-damaged. At first glance, it appeared meaningless. Random mileage logs, gas receipts, scattered dates. But analysts eventually realized several entries corresponded almost perfectly with disappearances of women across Texas and New Mexico. August 14, 1998.
Late.
Red scarf. September 29, 1998. Too loud. October 3, 1994. Hospital girl. The phrases chilled investigators because they resembled reminders rather than memories. Casual references to acts of unimaginable violence compressed into cryptic fragments only the killer fully understood. Forensic psychologists later argued the notebook reflected Granger's compulsive need to preserve control over his crimes privately while maintaining a normal public identity. And publicly, he still appeared disturbingly ordinary. Courtroom observers described him sitting motionless during proceedings, occasionally taking notes, rarely showing visible emotion. Families of victims stared at him with open hatred. Some wept openly during testimony. Others simply watched in silence, waiting decades for the chance to finally see the man investigators believed destroyed their lives. Detective Reeves testified for nearly 6 hours. By then he looked older than his 70 years. His voice occasionally cracked while recounting the original 1998 investigation. Jurors listened intently as he described standing beside Emily Parker's abandoned car beneath flashing patrol lights all those years earlier. "I knew somebody took her," Reeves said quietly from the witness stand. "I just didn't know who." Prosecutors then revealed another devastating detail the public had not heard before. Fibers recovered from Emily's clothing fragments matched carpet material found inside Granger's former warehouse workspace. Advanced modern testing had connected particles impossible to identify in 1998. Science had finally caught up to the killer. But the deeper investigators dug, the more monstrous the picture became. In November 2021, New Mexico authorities announced they were reviewing at least 12 unsolved disappearances potentially connected to Granger's travel history. Arizona investigators joined shortly afterward. Cases once considered isolated now appeared terrifyingly interconnected across state lines. One retired FBI profiler reviewing the evidence made a statement that stunned reporters. "We may only know a fraction of it." That possibility haunted everyone. Because if true, there were victims still missing. Still unnamed. Still buried somewhere beneath deserts and oil roads stretching across the Southwest. Search efforts intensified again. Excavation crews revisited remote properties tied loosely to Granger through old utility bills and employment records. Cadaver dogs repeatedly alerted near abandoned well sites. Some searches yielded animal remains. Others uncovered nothing. Then one operation near Pecos, Texas produced another human skeleton. Female, early 20s. Hands bound with degraded nylon cord. The body had been buried in a shallow grave less than half a mile from an abandoned maintenance road Granger serviced repeatedly during the summer of 1996. The victim was eventually identified as Melissa Torres, missing for 25 years. Her family had spent decades believing she left voluntarily after struggling financially. Detectives now believed she never even left the county alive. Each new identification deepened public horror. And through it all, Thomas Granger remained almost unnaturally detached. During one transport between hearings, a deputy later claimed Granger glanced toward reporters and smiled faintly as cameras flashed outside the courthouse. Not nervous, not ashamed, almost amused. The behavior infuriated families and investigators alike. Prosecutors privately worried jurors might interpret his calm demeanor as evidence of mental instability rather than predatory intent. Psychiatric evaluations, however, concluded Granger understood his actions completely. He was competent, calculated, fully aware. Then the case took another unexpected turn. In December 2021, forensic analysts restored audio from one heavily damaged cassette previously believed unusable. The recording contained only a few intelligible words buried beneath static. But among them was a phrase investigators had never expected to hear. There were two of them. The statement triggered immediate panic inside the task force. For years, investigators assumed Thomas Granger operated alone. Now they faced the possibility that someone else had participated, or, at minimum, witnessed the crimes. Detective Reeves reportedly became obsessed with the possibility overnight. He revisited old witness statements searching for overlooked names, unexplained vehicles, suspicious associates. Analysts combed through Granger's employment history again, identifying coworkers who repeatedly appeared near critical timelines. One name surfaced more often than expected: Earl Dunning, former oil transport driver, long deceased. And according to multiple archived reports, Earl Dunning had been one of the last people seen at the diner where Emily Parker worked on the night she disappeared. Earl Dunning had been dead for 8 years by the time investigators reopened his connection to the case. Heart failure. Age, 63. Buried outside Abilene beside his second wife. For decades, nobody considered him important. In the original 1998 investigation, Dunning appeared only briefly in witness interviews as another late-night diner customer passing through Odessa. Detectives questioned him once, documented nothing suspicious, and moved on. Now his name was suddenly everywhere. Payroll records showed Dunning and Thomas Granger worked overlapping oil transport routes multiple times throughout the 1990s. Gas receipts recovered from Granger's notebook placed them in the same counties during periods tied to disappearances. Old dispatch logs suggested they occasionally traveled together between remote job sites. Then investigators uncovered a photograph. The image surfaced inside a dusty storage box belonging to Dunning's widow. She surrendered it voluntarily after detectives approached her in early January 2022. The picture showed several oil workers standing beside tanker equipment sometime around 1997. Thomas Granger stood near the back, Earl Dunning beside him, both smiling. For Detective Reeves, the discovery triggered a sickening realization. The damaged cassette might not have referred to multiple victims. It might have referred to multiple offenders. Investigators immediately re-examined unsolved disappearances connected to locations where both men traveled simultaneously. The overlap was disturbing. Highway corridors, isolated lease roads, overnight service stops. Women vanishing near gas stations and diners positioned along industrial transport routes. A pattern was forming again. Only this time, it looked even darker. Task Force analysts theorized Dunning may have acted as a spotter, identifying vulnerable women traveling alone, frequenting late-night roadside businesses, helping Granger move through regions without attracting suspicion. Some investigators believed he participated directly in abductions. Others suspected he merely enabled them. Either possibility was horrifying, because it meant predators had potentially operated in tandem across Texas for years while law enforcement searched for a lone offender. Then came the truck. In February 2022, authorities located an old oil transport vehicle previously registered to Dunning before his death. The truck sat deteriorating inside a salvage yard outside Lubbock, stripped for parts and nearly forgotten beneath layers of dust and corrosion. Forensic teams examined it anyway. Most investigators expected nothing after so many years. Instead, luminol testing revealed extensive cleaned blood traces inside the rear cab compartment. One DNA profile matched Melissa Torres. Another profile belonged to an unidentified female still missing to this day. The salvage yard immediately became an active crime scene. Detectives tore apart every inch of the vehicle searching for hidden evidence. Beneath a cracked floor panel, technicians recovered a single gold earring wrapped in old electrical tape. Emily Parker's mother identified it from photographs within hours. Suddenly, prosecutors faced an even larger nightmare than before. If Dunning helped transport victims, then bodies could exist anywhere along thousands of miles of oil routes stretching across multiple states. The investigation expanded again. Federal agencies joined formally. Geographic profilers mapped movement patterns from old trucking logs. Analysts reconstructed fuel stops from archived receipts. Investigators searched forgotten lease roads visible only through decades-old satellite imagery. The scale became overwhelming. And still, families kept arriving. Some carried fading missing person flyers printed before smartphones existed. Others brought cassette recordings of loved ones' voices, hoping forensic analysts could compare them against the tapes recovered from Granger's shed. One father listened to a damaged recording 3 times before quietly whispering, "That's my daughter." Then he walked outside and broke down beside the courthouse steps while reporters watched in silence. The emotional toll on investigators became severe. Several detectives requested temporary reassignment after reviewing extended tape segments. One forensic analyst reportedly suffered panic attacks after identifying repeated background sounds suggesting victims had been restrained for prolonged periods before death. Yet the work continued relentlessly. Because for the first time in decades, buried victims finally had names again. And beneath all the horror lurked another question nobody could answer. Why did Thomas Granger stop? The disappearances linked confidently to him appeared to decline sharply after the early 2000s. Detectives debated explanations constantly. Illness,
age,
increased surveillance technology, changes in work patterns, fear after close calls. Then investigators uncovered medical records suggesting a possible answer. In 2003, Granger suffered a severe industrial accident at a drilling site near Midland. The injury damaged his lower spine permanently, limiting mobility for years afterward. Prosecutors believe the injury may have interrupted his ability to abduct victims physically. But they did not believe it changed his impulses. That theory gained terrifying support when analysts examined internet search history recovered from old hard drives seized at Granger's home. Though much of the data was corrupted, forensic technicians recovered searches involving missing women, unidentified remains, restraint methods, and local news reports about unresolved disappearances dating well into the 2010s. He had been watching, following coverage, reliving it, even after the killings appeared to stop. During pretrial hearings, prosecutors introduced another devastating piece of evidence recovered from Granger's property, a hand-drawn map marked with symbols investigators initially failed to understand. After weeks of analysis, they realized several markings corresponded to known body recovery sites. Others pointed toward locations never searched. Excavation teams moved immediately. One site near Fort Stockton yielded nothing but animal bones. Another revealed buried clothing fragments too degraded for identification. Then, outside a remote dry creek bed near Andrews County, cadaver dogs alerted violently beneath a cluster of mesquite trees. Investigators dug through compacted dirt under relentless wind and heat. For feet down, they uncovered human remains. Then another set beside them. 2 women buried together. One victim still wore remnants of hospital scrubs. The other carried a turquoise ring matching a decades-old missing persons report from New Mexico. By spring 2022, authorities officially connected Thomas Granger to at least 9 murders. Privately, many investigators believed the true number was much higher. And still, no full confession came. Granger continued denying direct responsibility despite mounting evidence. His attorneys argued contamination, prosecutorial bias, unreliable timelines. They claimed the state stitched unrelated cases together into a media spectacle around one damaged man. But then prosecutors revealed perhaps the single most crushing testimony of the entire case. A former inmate housed briefly beside Granger in county jail came forward claiming Granger spoke openly about keeping trophies. According to the inmate, Granger described victims as moments rather than people. Some cry, he allegedly said. Some get quiet. The testimony sent visible shockwaves through the courtroom. Families sobbed openly. Jurors stared motionless at the defense table. And Thomas Granger simply sat there, expression unreadable. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence, the investigation still contained enormous gaps. Entire years remained unaccounted for. Several tapes referenced unidentified locations investigators never found. One recording included the distant whistle of a train line that analysts struggled to match geographically. Detective Reeves became consumed by those missing pieces. At 72 years old, retired officially for over a decade, he worked the case daily as though trapped inside unfinished business from another life. Colleagues worried about him privately. He barely slept, smoked constantly again despite heart problems, spent nights reviewing maps alone under fluorescent office lights. Because Reeves believed there were victims still hidden. Victims no one even knew to search for. Then, in June 2022, the investigation received a phone call that changed everything once more. A woman from Arizona contacted the task force after seeing national coverage about Granger and the cassette tapes. She claimed she survived an attempted abduction in 1999 near a truck stop outside El Paso. At the time, police never identified the attacker. But she remembered one detail with absolute certainty. The man drove an oil transport truck. And she remembered another thing, too. There was someone else inside the cab. The survivor's name was withheld from the public, but investigators would later describe her testimony as one of the most important breaks in the entire case. She had been 21 years old in 1999, driving west alone after visiting family in Midland. Just after midnight, she stopped at a truck plaza outside El Paso to refuel. She remembered exhaustion more than fear. Long highways, radio static, sodium lights flickering over rows of parked 18-wheelers. Then a man approached her. Friendly at first. Middle-aged. Work boots. Calm voice. He asked whether she needed help checking a tire that looked low. She followed him toward the edge of the lot. That decision nearly got her killed. According to her statement, the man suddenly grabbed her from behind and tried forcing her toward the passenger side of an oil transport truck parked near the service road. She fought violently, kicking and screaming. During the struggle, she saw another figure inside the cab. Watching. Not helping her. Watching. The attack ended only because another truck driver entered the lot unexpectedly, headlights sweeping across the scene. The attacker released her immediately and climbed into the transport vehicle. She remembered the truck peeling away into darkness before she could read the full license plate. At the time, investigators dismissed the incident as an attempted assault by unidentified transients. Now, 23 years later, she identified Thomas Granger from a photo lineup within seconds. Then she pointed to Earl Dunning.
Same certainty.
Same reaction. No question, she said quietly. That's them. The task force exploded into motion again. For the first time, investigators believed they could prove collaboration directly between the two men. Analysts revisited old trucking manifests and uncovered dozens of undocumented route overlaps stretching across Texas, New Mexico, and western Arizona throughout the late 1990s. The theory hardened quickly. Granger hunted. Dunning facilitated. One selected targets. The other helped move them unseen across industrial corridors where oil traffic flowed constantly through isolated highways. And suddenly, the scale of the nightmare widened again. Because if victims crossed state lines, federal jurisdiction intensified dramatically. FBI profilers studying the evidence noted something deeply disturbing about the pair's dynamic. Serial offenders operating together are extraordinarily rare. Most predators function alone due to paranoia, ego, or compulsion for control. Cooperative killers tend to escalate faster, become more confident, and leave broader trails of devastation. That possibility haunted investigators. If Granger and Dunning truly worked together for years, then the known victim count might represent only a fraction of reality. Meanwhile, excavation teams continued uncovering remains. One site outside Carlsbad, New Mexico, yielded skeletal fragments matching a waitress missing since 1992. Another burial area near Midland contained personal belongings linked to 2 unidentified women. Detectives worked around the clock cross-referencing old missing person reports against recovered evidence. Families arrived almost daily now. Some left with answers. Others left shattered all over again. One mother listened silently as detectives explained they had identified her daughter through dental records after 28 years. When they finished speaking, she reportedly stared at the table for nearly 30 seconds before whispering, "I knew she didn't leave me." The emotional gravity surrounding the investigation began affecting entire communities across West Texas. Local news stations replayed archival footage from the 1990s beside modern excavation scenes. Former residents remembered old rumors suddenly transformed into horrifying truth. Women who grew up during that era spoke openly about fear that once seemed irrational but now appeared fully justified. Everybody remembered the roads. The endless dark roads. And somewhere inside all of it sat Thomas Granger in county jail, still refusing full confession. But cracks were beginning to appear. In July 2022, prosecutors confronted Granger with enhanced images from the recovered Polaroids. One photograph showed part of a victim's reflection visible in a cracked mirror behind Granger himself. Analysts sharpened the image enough to reveal his face partially. There was no plausible denial left. During the interview, Granger reportedly stared at the photograph for a long time before saying softly, "You people should have left it buried."
Not they. It.
Detectives noticed the wording immediately, because it suggested he viewed the crimes not as separate acts but as one massive hidden thing, a secret structure buried beneath decades of silence. Interrogators pushed harder. They asked where more bodies were hidden. Granger refused. They asked whether anyone else participated besides Dunning. No answer. They asked how many women died. Granger looked toward the wall and said, "More than you'll ever find." The statement sent a chill through every investigator present. Some believed he exaggerated for control. Others feared he was telling the truth. And evidence increasingly suggested the latter. That same month, forensic accountants uncovered irregular cash payments between Granger and Dunning spanning nearly a decade. Amounts were small enough to avoid suspicion but consistent enough to imply ongoing cooperation. Some payments aligned almost exactly with known disappearances. One transfer occurred 3 days after Emily Parker vanished. Then another revelation surfaced. A retired mechanic from Midland contacted investigators after recognizing Granger on television. He claimed Granger once brought an oil transport truck into a shop during the late 1990s requesting replacement interior carpeting after chemical spills. The mechanic remembered something else too. There had been a smell.
Not oil. Not gasoline.
Something rotten. At the time, he ignored it. Now he could barely speak while recounting the memory. Investigators tracked records proving the truck belonged to Dunning. Forensic testing on preserved upholstery fragments recovered from the salvage yard later identified human blood proteins soaked deep into the material beneath industrial cleaning chemicals. The truck itself had likely been a mobile crime scene. A transport chamber moving victims invisibly across hundreds of miles while ordinary traffic passed around it nightly. The realization horrified even veteran FBI agents. But perhaps the darkest discovery emerged from the cassette tapes still under analysis. Audio experts isolated repeated background sounds previously overlooked: train horns, radio broadcasts, industrial equipment, weather patterns. Piece by piece, they reconstructed probable timelines for several recordings. One tape appeared to span nearly 48 hours, meaning at least one victim survived in captivity for 2 full days. Detective Reeves reportedly stopped speaking for several minutes after hearing that conclusion. Colleagues later described him sitting alone in the task force office long after midnight staring at old maps covered in notes from 1998. He had spent decades believing Emily Parker died quickly. Now he feared she suffered far longer. The guilt consumed him. Friends noticed physical changes rapidly. Weight loss, tremors in his hands, sleeplessness. Reeves continued working anyway, driven by something beyond professional duty now. Investigators younger than his grandchildren watched him move through evidence rooms with relentless focus, like a man trying to outrun time itself. Because time was becoming another problem. Thomas Granger's health was deteriorating rapidly. Medical examinations confirmed advanced liver failure worsening by the month. Prosecutors feared he might die before trial concluded. Families panicked at the possibility of losing the only living person capable of revealing burial sites still hidden across the Southwest. So investigators tried another strategy: compassion. In August 2022, Detective Reeves entered the interrogation room alone, carrying a photograph of Emily Parker. No lawyers, no aggressive questioning, no evidence binders. Just the photo. Reeves reportedly placed it on the table and said quietly, "Her mother's still alive." Granger stared at the image without touching it. For nearly a minute neither man spoke. Then Reeves asked, "Where is the rest of her?" According to transcripts, Granger's expression changed for the first time since his arrest. Not guilt exactly. Not remorse. Fatigue. Deep exhaustion. He leaned back slowly and closed his eyes. Then he whispered something investigators almost didn't catch. "There's water there now." Reeves froze. "What water?" Granger opened his eyes again and smiled faintly. Then he asked for his attorney. "There's water there now." The sentence detonated through the task force within hours. Investigators immediately scrambled through old land surveys, satellite records, reservoir expansions, flood control projects, irrigation developments, anything involving major environmental changes near locations connected to Thomas Granger during the late 1990s. Detective Reeves barely slept for 3 straight days. He became fixated on one possibility. A reservoir outside Midland expanded significantly in 2001 after heavy infrastructure modifications connected to regional water projects. Several low-lying service roads and abandoned oil access areas were submerged permanently during construction. One of those roads sat less than 12 miles from a warehouse tied to Granger's old trucking contracts. Search teams mobilized immediately. By September 2022, sonar boats moved slowly across murky reservoir water while divers descended through near-zero visibility conditions beneath them. The operation drew massive media attention. Helicopters circled overhead daily. Families gathered along shorelines watching silently as crews searched beneath dark water for women missing longer than some investigators had been alive. Then divers found the first vehicle, a rusted sedan buried beneath layers of silt. License plate records identified it within hours. 1990, one missing person case. Female driver vanished at age 19. Inside the trunk, divers discovered skeletal remains. The atmosphere surrounding the reservoir operation changed instantly from cautious hope to raw dread. If one victim had been hidden there successfully for decades, there could be more. And there were. Over the next 6 weeks, recovery teams located 3 additional submerged vehicles scattered along the flooded service route. 2 contained human remains. Another held personal items linked to a missing woman from New Mexico. The water had concealed everything.
Perfectly.
Detective Reeves reportedly stood beside the shoreline after the 3rd recovery and whispered. He planned this because the timing aligned too precisely. Investigators now believed Granger and possibly Dunning understood the reservoir expansion project before construction began. They may have intentionally used the area knowing evidence would eventually disappear underwater forever. It was premeditation on a scale investigators found almost impossible to comprehend. And yet, even with bodies emerging from the reservoir, the investigation still felt incomplete. Some victims remained unidentified. Other disappearances lacked physical evidence entirely. Analysts estimated the confirmed timeline of activity now stretched from at least 1991 through 2003. 12 years. 12 years of disappearances hidden beneath isolated roads, industrial routes, and forgotten stretches of desert. Communities across Texas reeled under the psychological weight of it. Local women who once dismissed old fears as paranoia suddenly revisited memories from decades earlier. Strange encounters at gas stations, trucks following too closely at night, unexplained men lingering outside roadside diners. The roads looked different now. Every empty highway carried ghosts. Meanwhile, prosecutors accelerated trial preparations, fearing Granger's declining health could still derail everything. Medical reports described worsening liver complications and internal bleeding episodes requiring hospitalization. Yet despite physical deterioration, his mind remained sharp. Disturbingly sharp. During one jailhouse psychiatric session, Granger reportedly corrected an investigator's timeline regarding one victim's disappearance by exactly 2 days. Not because he confessed. Because he remembered. The precision chilled everyone in the room. Then another unexpected breakthrough arrived. Forensic audio analysts enhancing background noise from the Emily tape isolated faint music playing somewhere distant during the recording. After weeks of comparison work, they identified the song as a local radio broadcast aired specifically through a small Odessa station during overnight hours in August 1998. The station's transmission radius was limited, meaning Emily had likely been held somewhere relatively close to Odessa itself, not transported far away initially. Investigators revisited old warehouse properties tied to Granger one more time, including the demolished trucking facility connected earlier through the calendar visible in photographs. Ground-penetrating radar scans conducted at the former site revealed anomalies beneath newly developed industrial pavement. Excavation crews tore through concrete under floodlights while media cameras waited behind police barriers. On the second night, they uncovered human bone fragments. Then more. At least 3 separate victims buried beneath what had become a commercial storage yard. One set of remains belonged to Carla Jennings. 24 years after she vanished, her family finally received confirmation. Her brother later stood outside the recovery site trembling with emotion as reporters crowded nearby. "We thought she was still out there somewhere," he said quietly. "Turns out she was under our feet the whole time." The statement haunted investigators. Because how many other victims still remained hidden beneath ordinary places people passed every day without knowing. As excavation continued, forensic teams uncovered remnants of restraints, degraded clothing fibers, and spent ammunition casings. Analysts now believe the warehouse functioned as a primary holding location during the late 1990s, before some bodies were relocated. The implications were monstrous. Victims had likely been brought there alive.
Kept there.
Possibly tortured there. All while trucks moved normally through Odessa streets outside. And somehow nobody saw. The prosecution's case had become overwhelming beyond anything originally imagined. Yet a strange tension persisted behind closed doors among investigators. Because Thomas Granger still had not truly spoken. Not fully. Not honestly. And everyone feared the truth inside him might disappear forever once he died. So in October 2022, prosecutors offered something unthinkable. A conditional negotiation. Not immunity. Never that. But limited concessions regarding sentencing arrangements and burial recommendations if Granger revealed all victim locations. Families were divided instantly. Some demanded absolute punishment no matter what. Others pleaded for answers before time ran out. The debate tore through communities already exhausted by decades of grief. Then Granger responded. He agreed to talk. But only to Detective Reeves. No prosecutors. No cameras. No audience. Just Reeves. The meeting occurred inside a secure interview room on October 19, 2022. According to later summaries, Reeves entered carrying nothing except a legal pad and a bottle of water. Granger appeared physically weaker than before. Yellowed skin. Noticeable weight loss. Hands trembling slightly against the tabletop. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then Granger asked quietly, "Did they pull the cars out?" Reeves answered yes. Granger nodded slowly, like a man confirming weather conditions. And then, for the first time, he began describing what happened. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Matter of fact.
Clinical.
He admitted targeting women traveling alone late at night because nobody noticed patterns back then. He described selecting victims near truck stops, diners, gas stations, isolated service roads. He admitted using temporary work routes to avoid geographic consistency. Then came the detail Reeves later said would haunt him forever. Granger claimed he often watched victims for days beforehand, learning routines, work schedules, driving habits. Emily Parker had reportedly caught his attention nearly 2 weeks before she disappeared. She smiled at everybody, he said. The room reportedly fell silent after that. Granger confirmed Earl Dunning assisted repeatedly, sometimes driving, sometimes scouting locations, sometimes helping dispose of evidence. According to Granger, Dunning preferred avoiding direct violence, but liked the control. Investigators listening remotely outside the room described physical nausea during portions of the confession. Then Reeves asked the question consuming him for 24 years. Did Emily suffer? Granger stared at the table a long time before answering. Yes. Reeves later admitted that single word hit harder than every photograph, tape, and excavation combined. Because after decades chasing uncertainty, he finally understood the truth fully. And the truth was unbearable. The interview lasted almost 6 hours. By the end, Granger provided rough directions to multiple burial areas investigators had never searched. Some descriptions were vague, others shockingly precise. Dry creek crossings, abandoned pump stations, old utility corridors long erased from maps. Then, near the end of the session, Granger said something that stopped Reeves cold. "There's one you don't know about." Reeves looked up immediately. "What do you mean?" Granger smiled faintly again. "The first one. The first one." Detective Reeves later said the words felt like ice water poured directly into his chest. For years, investigators believed they understood the timeline. Melissa Torres in 1991 was considered the earliest likely victim connected to Thomas Granger. Now, sitting under fluorescent lights inside a county interrogation room, Granger was calmly suggesting the killings started even earlier. Before the known disappearances. Before the patterns. Before anyone was looking. Reeves asked him who she was. Granger leaned back slowly in the chair, breathing unevenly through visible exhaustion. His physical condition had deteriorated dramatically by then, but his eyes remained sharp, focused. "She hitchhiked," he said quietly. "No name, no date, just that." Investigators listening behind the observation glass reportedly exchanged stunned looks immediately. Hitchhiker murders were notoriously difficult to solve in the late 1980s and early 1990s because victims often traveled anonymously across state lines. Missing person reports were delayed or never filed at all. A victim like that could disappear forever. Reeves pressed harder. "Where?" Granger looked toward the ceiling for several seconds before answering. "South of Pecos. Before Dunning." The statement mattered enormously. It implied Granger killed alone before meeting Earl Dunning, meaning the violence may have evolved over time into a coordinated operation rather than beginning that way. And if true, the victim count could extend back decades further than anyone imagined. Investigators immediately reopened unidentified remains cases from West Texas dating into the late 1980s. Analysts searched old records for female hitchhikers found near Pecos corridors. Most files were incomplete. Some evidence had been destroyed years earlier due to storage limitations and outdated retention policies. Still, one case surfaced repeatedly. Unidentified young woman discovered in a shallow desert grave 20 miles south of Pecos. No identification. No suspect. Cause of death undetermined due to severe decomposition. The body had been buried wearing a faded denim jacket with a missing brass button. Then forensic technicians revisiting evidence from Granger's shed uncovered an old coffee can containing miscellaneous objects collected over decades. Inside was a brass button. The room reportedly went silent. DNA degradation prevented direct confirmation, but investigators increasingly believed they had identified Granger's first known victim. A woman whose name the world never learned. The realization changed the emotional atmosphere of the entire investigation. Families had spent years imagining a monster emerging suddenly during the 1990s. Instead, detectives now saw something colder and more terrifying, a predator evolving gradually over time, becoming more organized, more confident, more efficient. Learning. By November 2022, excavation teams searched 4 new locations provided during Granger's confession sessions. Some produced no evidence. Others revealed fragments of unimaginable horror. At a remote utility corridor outside Fort Stockton, investigators uncovered partial remains belonging to 2 unidentified women buried side by side beneath industrial debris. Nearby, they found remnants of duct tape and degraded fabric restraints. Another site near the New Mexico border yielded a shallow grave so poorly concealed investigators believed Granger must have panicked during disposal. That realization triggered fresh concern. What interrupted him? Why were some burials meticulous while others appeared rushed? The answer may have emerged through newly recovered employment records. Analysts discovered Granger narrowly avoided police contact multiple times during the late 1990s through sheer coincidence. Traffic stops, equipment inspections, workplace incidents. In one case, a deputy unknowingly searched a vehicle containing restraints and suspicious stains, but released Granger after accepting explanations involving oil equipment maintenance. The deputy later learned the truth while watching television coverage. According to colleagues, he left the room immediately and vomited in the parking lot. The investigation now carried another unbearable layer. All the moments the killer nearly got caught. All the opportunities lost. Meanwhile, national attention surrounding the case intensified into obsession. Major networks aired multi-part specials reconstructing the disappearances. Former residents of Odessa and Midland flooded social media with memories and rumors from the era. Amateur investigators created digital maps tracking Granger's movements county by county. The highways themselves became infamous. Dark stretches of Texas road transformed into symbols of dread and unresolved grief. And at the center of it all sat Thomas Granger, growing physically weaker by the week yet still controlling pieces of the narrative through selective confession. Some investigators believed he enjoyed it. The power, the suspense, the knowledge that entire communities depended on him for answers. Detective Reeves despised that dynamic more than anything. After each interview session, he reportedly sat alone in his office for long periods staring at victim photographs spread across his desk. One colleague later recalled Reeves whispering, "He still thinks he owns them." That belief drove Reeves relentlessly during the remaining interrogations. He pushed harder each session, demanding names, locations, timelines. Sometimes Granger cooperated partially. Other times he retreated into silence for hours. Yet gradually, the outlines of the truth emerged clearer. Victims were often selected opportunistically, but held according to ritualized patterns. Granger described psychological testing, observing how captives reacted under fear, isolation, exhaustion. Some recordings recovered from the cassettes suddenly made horrifying new sense to behavioral analysts. The tapes were not merely trophies. They were documentation, experiments, control preserved on magnetic tape. Then investigators uncovered another devastating revelation hidden inside Granger's notebook. Several entries contained weather references matching dates of known disappearances. Analysts initially dismissed them as random observations until forensic psychologists identified a disturbing pattern. Granger preferred storms. Heavy rain reduced traffic, erased tracks, muffled screams, and discouraged roadside witnesses. Some victims disappeared during severe weather events investigators once considered unrelated coincidences. It wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. And that strategy had worked for decades. By early December 2022, authorities officially linked Granger and Dunning to 14 murders. Privately, the task force believed the true total likely exceeded 20. Still, bodies remained missing. Names remained unknown. Then one of the most emotionally devastating discoveries of the entire case emerged from forensic restoration of a heavily damaged cassette tape labeled simply Winter. The audio quality was terrible, distorted, fragmented. But midway through the recording, investigators heard a woman singing softly to herself through tears. A lullaby. Analysts cleaned the audio repeatedly while searching for identifiable details. Eventually, a detective from New Mexico recognized the melody immediately. It was a regional Spanish lullaby taught commonly in parts of southern New Mexico during the 1980s. Investigators circulated the clip quietly among families of missing Hispanic women from that era. 3 weeks later, a woman contacted authorities claiming the voice might belong to her sister Elena Ruiz, who vanished in 1995 while driving to Las Cruces. She identified the lullaby because their mother used to sing it to both of them as children. The confirmation shattered investigators emotionally, not because it proved another murder. They already expected that. Because in the middle of terror, captivity, and darkness, a victim had tried soothing herself with a memory from childhood. That detail lingered inside the task force like poison. Several investigators reportedly stopped listening to the tapes personally after that. But Detective Reeves continued. Every single one. He believed the victims deserved witnesses now, even if decades late. Then came the medical emergency. On January 7, 2023, Thomas Granger collapsed inside county jail after internal bleeding complications linked to liver failure. He was rushed under guard to a hospital in Lubbock where doctors stabilized him temporarily. The possibility of imminent death triggered panic across law enforcement agencies. There were still unanswered locations. Still unidentified victims. Still missing remains. So despite protests from defense attorneys, investigators resumed questioning Granger from his hospital room once doctors allowed limited communication. And there, surrounded by machines and armed deputies, Granger revealed perhaps the single most horrifying detail of the entire investigation. Some victims, he claimed, were never buried at all. Some victims were never buried at all. The words spread through the task force like an electric shock. Detective Reeves immediately asked what he meant, but Thomas Granger only stared through the hospital window for several seconds before answering in a voice barely above a whisper. The oil fields took them. At first, investigators thought he meant remote disposal sites hidden near drilling areas. Then Granger elaborated. Industrial burn pits, chemical waste trenches, abandoned extraction shafts. Places where heat, corrosion, machinery, and time erased almost everything. The realization horrified forensic teams instantly. During the 1980s and 1990s, environmental oversight across isolated oil regions was inconsistent at best. Temporary industrial sites appeared and vanished constantly. Waste pits were filled, covered, relocated. Equipment yards were demolished without detailed records. Human remains deposited in those environments could disappear almost completely. And according to Granger, that was exactly why he used them. He described selecting locations where nothing stayed whole. The room reportedly fell silent after that sentence, because investigators understood immediately what it meant for the missing women still unaccounted for. Some would never be recovered, not because nobody searched, because almost nothing remained to find. The emotional devastation among victims' families became impossible to contain. For years they endured uncertainty, imagining shallow graves somewhere beneath desert earth. Now they faced something even crueler, the possibility their daughters, sisters, mothers had been erased systematically inside industrial wastelands built for destruction. One family member reportedly screamed at investigators inside the courthouse hallway after hearing the news. "You're telling me she vanished into dirt?" Nobody knew how to answer. Meanwhile, prosecutors faced another growing problem. Thomas Granger was deteriorating rapidly. Hospital records showed worsening liver collapse, fluid accumulation, repeated internal bleeding episodes. Doctors privately warned authorities he might not survive the year. And despite everything he had revealed, investigators believed he was still withholding information. So they intensified pressure. In late January 2023, federal profilers joined interrogation sessions directly for the first time. Their goal was not simply extracting confessions anymore. It was understanding behavioral patterns well enough to predict undiscovered disposal sites before Granger died. The sessions became psychologically brutal. Profilers confronted him with victim photographs one after another. Families submitted personal images from birthdays, graduations, weddings never completed. Detectives read impact statements aloud inside the room while Granger listened expressionless from his hospital bed. Then, Unexpectedly, something shifted. Not remorse. Not exactly. But exhaustion. During one overnight session, Granger reportedly asked whether Detective Reeves still believed in God. The question caught everyone off guard. Reeves answered quietly, "Not the way I used to." Granger nodded slightly, like he understood. Then he said something investigators would later replay, repeatedly searching for meaning. "They kept looking at me like I was supposed to stop." The statement disturbed behavioral experts deeply because it exposed the fractured psychology driving the crimes. According to later analysis, Granger appeared incapable of processing victims as fully autonomous human beings during the acts themselves. He interpreted fear, pleading, resistance almost as interruptions to compulsions already unfolding internally. Not rage. Compulsion. Cold, ritualized compulsion. And for decades, nobody recognized it hiding beneath ordinary routines and oil-field uniforms. The task force continued acting on every clue Granger provided. Excavations spread into western New Mexico and eastern Arizona. One search near an abandoned extraction trench uncovered bone fragments too degraded for immediate identification. Another yielded jewelry tied to a missing waitress from 1993. Each discovery reinforced the terrifying scale of the operation. This was never random violence. It was sustained predation hidden beneath industrial America. By spring 2023, authorities officially identified 17 victims connected directly or circumstantially to Granger and Dunning. But still, some remained unnamed. One particular unidentified victim haunted investigators intensely, the woman from the 1987 Pecos burial site believed to be Granger's first known murder. Despite national media coverage and DNA genealogy efforts, nobody claimed her. No family. No missing person match. Nothing. Detective Reeves reportedly visited the evidence archive alone one evening and stared at the reconstructed facial approximation for nearly an hour. According to another investigator, Reeves finally whispered, "Somebody loved you." Then he walked out without another word. The emotional erosion inside the task force became severe. Detectives developed insomnia, panic symptoms, emotional detachment. Counselors were brought in quietly after multiple investigators experienced breakdowns reviewing tapes and excavation photographs. One forensic anthropologist reportedly resigned entirely after processing remains recovered from the reservoir. Another detective began sleeping with lights on. The case infected people. That was how many described it. Not merely difficult, contagious. And still the nation watched. News specials called it the Texas oil field murders. Podcasts released hour-long breakdowns of every recovered tape and excavation site. Former residents from Odessa, Midland, Pecos, and Big Spring shared stories online about unexplained encounters during the 1990s. The fear from that era resurfaced vividly. Women remembered carrying tire irons beside car seats. Parents remembered waiting awake until daughters got home. Truck stops once considered ordinary now appeared sinister in retrospect. The roads themselves felt haunted. Then, in May 2023, investigators made perhaps the single most unexpected discovery of the entire case. A survivor. Not an attempted abduction. An actual captive who escaped.